Welcome back. So before going into the Spring Security detail files and or detail of developing part, we it's very necessary to understand some few basic terms that are related to Spring Security. So some of them I have listed out. So I'll go through and a very short explanations like principal. Let us start with principal. So principal is nothing but it's a currently logged in user in the system. So user who is logged in right now is called principal in terms of security context. Authentication, confirming truth of the credentials. If I talk about his some user is authenticated, it means that his credentials are correct. Authorization, so this define access policy of the principal. It means whether what user is can do, what user cannot do. So this is authorization. Granted authority, so it's a set of permissions that is granted to that particular principal. So it's a list of authorities. Authentication manager, so it's a controller in the authentication process, and its major work is to authenticate the user via, the user who is already no, in the memory that has to be authenticated. Okay, so it simply authenticates user saved in memory via authenticate method. It's having only one method in that. Authentication providers is an interface that maps to a data store that stores your data. So you can say that it is having one storage which stores the authenticated object or data, right? Now coming to authentication object. So object that is created upon authentication, it holds the login credentials. It's an internal Spring Security interface. So when one user is authenticated, so we call this authentication object. So this is one object which can be understood by the Spring Security classes. So it's internal to Spring Security, right? It's one of the interface. Then coming to user details. So the data object that contain the user credentials but also the role of that user, means it is not only having the credentials but also have the roles of that user. Then coming to user detail service. So it's this service collects the user credentials, authorities, and build the user detail object. Means the previous term that I talked about, user details, is get created via the as a response of the user detail service, right? So these are the major terms and terminology in terms of Spring Security. So when we create one sample projects, and when we add the Spring Security starter dependency in that, so we'll see this all these classes. What is these classes are already present in the system in the Spring Security framework. We'll just go through that. Once we complete that part, then we started our own. Okay, so since this was one of the basic things, so I just wanted to cover that before going into a deep dive. Okay, so let's meet in the next session. Until then, bye.